My sister found out about my first apartment and broke in with my parents while I was at work. They decided I should let her stay because I had extra space. I came home to find her partying with her boyfriend. My younger sister, Emily, 30, has just attempted something so strange that I, 34, can't believe it. Before I get into what happened last week, I need to clarify our past so that what she did makes sense. Emily and I grew up in what appeared to be a regular household from the outside. Our parents owned a modest accounting practice together and were well known in our neighborhood. But within our home, things were different. Emily was born when I was 4 years old, and the dynamic changed right away. I moved from being the focus of attention to becoming background noise. Emily used to have piano lessons, painting courses, and a new bike every other year. I received hand-me-downs from cousins and was instructed to be appreciative. When she decided to attend private school in ninth grade, they cobbled together the money. When I asked my father about enrolling to a summer engineering program in high school, he stated we couldn't afford extras. Emily went to Paris on a class trip during her junior year. I worked at a supermarket shop to save enough for a second-hand automobile. The tendency is maintained till maturity. Emily attended a private institution where our parents paid her full tuition and rent. I attended community college and worked night jobs at a warehouse to finance my tuition. She finished with a marketing degree and returned home. That was 5 years ago. She still lives with our parents rent-free and has never worked for more than 4 months. She's always got an excuse ready. The boss was harsh. The commute was excessively long. Her abilities were insufficient for the task. Our mother constantly backed her up, claiming Emily was still learning things out. Emily started dating Luke, a 29-year-old male, 3 years ago. He moved into our parents' home after 6 months. They married in a ceremony that was more expensive than my whole college education. Luke works in IT support and earns a fair living while Emily continues to refuse to work. They discussed obtaining their own apartment but never did anything about it. Our parents' house is a small 3-bedroom ranch, and with 4 people living there, it became tight. Emily continually moaned about not having enough room, but she never took any practical efforts to improve the problem. I moved out when I was 20. I shared a room in a house with 3 other guys and worked 2 jobs to meet my expenses. My parents didn't offer to assist, and I didn't ask. We saw each other over important holidays, which was great with me. The less time I'd have spent dealing with Emily's continuous complaints and our parents' explanations for her, the better. In March 2020, everything came apart for me. The restaurant where I worked as a line cook closed down permanently. 3 weeks later, the warehouse laid me off because orders had dried up. My roommate lost his job at about the same time. We couldn't pay the rent on our 2-bedroom apartment. He returned to his hometown. I sold the majority of my furniture and everything else I could part with. I had my old Chevy Silverado that I had bought secondhand years ago, and I discovered someone selling a slide and camper shell for $800. It needs significant repair but was structurally sound. I set it up myself at a grocery store parking lot. I phoned my parents and asked if I could park the camper in their driveway temporarily while I sought for a job and saved money for a new place. My father stated the driveway was full of their automobiles, Emily's car, and Luke's truck. My mother stated that they did not have room for me. When I explained that I'd be in the driveway in a camper, not their house, my father said I could remain, provided I paid $1,500 each month. I was unemployed and trying to save every dime I could. I told them I could not afford it. In such circumstance, my father advised me to consider other options. He also noted that the camper would appear unattractive in front of their home. Emily approached the door and giggled when she spotted the camper. She inquired if I truly intended to live in that contraption like a homeless person. Luke also came out and snapped shots with his phone. He mentioned something about it being too nice not to share. I drove away and spent the first night in a mall parking lot. I couldn't sleep because I kept hearing noises outside and was afraid someone was going to break into or tow my truck. Over the following few weeks, I established the routine. Daytime parking at public libraries was typically fine. Some grocery shops didn't worry if you spent the night in the distant corner of the parking lot. I was instructed to relocate more times than I can count. Someone claimed to be from the neighborhood association and threatened to contact the police despite the fact that I was parked on a public street in a business area. I relocated to escape difficulties. I had a little battery pack that could run a light and charge my phone, but it didn't last long. I began carrying a long extension wire and plugging into outdoor outlets on buildings at night when no one was around. I utilized public toilets and Planet Fitness to shower. I spent my days searching for employment, reading books from the library, and watching old DVDs on a portable player I'd had since high school. After 4 months, I was hired at a tiny manufacturing facility in a town approximately 40 minutes away from where I had been parked. The work was entry-level machine operating, but it was full-time and included benefits. My new boss's name was Tom, and he and his brother owned the firm. The facility has an old parking lot in the back that wasn't used anymore. Tom observed that I arrived an hour before my shift and stayed late most days. He inquired where I lived, and I told him about the camper. He told me I could park it permanently in the rear lot if I wanted. He allowed me to run a power line from the building and offered me access to a utility sink in the bathroom. In exchange, I promised to spend a few hours on Sundays on maintenance activities. It was the best I'd had in months. I became friends with Francis, the night security guard, and we would occasionally eat supper together when our shifts coincided. I worked every hour of overtime they offered. I learned to run various machinery and took on additional responsibility. After 1 year, Tom elevated me to shift leader. By early this year, I had been promoted again to production supervisor. My income was higher than what I had earned before the epidemic at both of my previous employment combined. I began seriously saving. I continued to live in the camper because I had no rent or utilities. I saved over half of my income. By June, I had saved enough for a down payment. I discovered a little 2-bedroom apartment in an older building close to work. It was not fancy, but it was mine. I signed the lease and relocated in the middle of July. I did not inform my family immediately away. We weren't in frequent communication, however. I renewed my driver's license with my new address and spent August slowly buying furnishings and settling in. I kept things simple since I had been accustomed to live with less. In early September, my Aunt Grace called me. She's my mother's younger sister and one of the few relatives I've kept in touch with throughout the years. She claimed she had heard from my family that I had bought a new house and wanted to congratulate me. I thanked her and inquired how she had heard. She stated that Emily had written on Facebook about me obtaining an apartment and how well I was doing now. I thought it was unusual because Emily and I didn't speak, but I didn't think much of it. A week later, my cousin Sophia messaged me to ask for my new address so she could send me a housewarming present. I handed it to her and thanked her. She said she'd noticed Emily's posts about my new house and was relieved things had improved for me. I became inquisitive and checked Facebook for the first time in months. Emily has written many posts about me in the last 2 weeks. She'd written about how her brother had struggled but persevered, and now he had a wonderful apartment. She made it appear as if she had been supportive the entire time. Several relatives had reacted thanking her on being a nice sister. I did not correct the record publicly, but I thought it was strange. On a Tuesday morning 3 weeks ago, I departed for work about 6:30 a.m. As usual, I worked a regular shift and remained late to teach a new operator on one of the machines. I returned to my place around 7 that evening. When I arrived into the parking lot, I noticed Luke's vehicle parked in a visitor place near the building door. I strolled up to my door, which was propped open with a doorstop. I heard voices within. I stepped in and saw Emily in my living room directing Luke and our father on where to place boxes. There were sacks and containers heaped against the wall. My bedroom door was open and I saw that someone had put blankets on the bed. Emily was standing in the middle of the room holding her phone and shooting photos. When she spotted me, she smiled and said they had been waiting for me to arrive home. She claimed they wanted to surprise me. I inquired what was going on. Emily stated that she and Luke were moving in. She said that the apartment had 2 bedrooms, and I was only using one, so it made perfect sense for them to use the other room. She stated they'd pay my rent, but when I inquired how much, she answered $300 each month. My apartment's rent was $2,000 per month. I informed her it was not going to happen and that they needed to go. Emily's expression shifted instantaneously. She said I was being unreasonable. She said that relatives helped each other out and that I lived in my camper for nearly a year to save money, implying that I was unconcerned about luxury. She claimed they had been confined at our parents' place, and here was my time to do something kind for her. Luke said that they'd already begun moving their belongings in and unpacking, so it made sense to let them stay. I wondered how they'd gotten into my flat in the first place. My father stated that he still had ties with local locksmiths through his company and had requested that someone come out that afternoon. I looked at the door and noticed they had replaced the lock. The original lock mechanism was sitting on an adjacent box which had tool marks. I informed them that they had broken into my flat and changed the locks without authorization. I urged them to start packing everything back up and leave immediately. Emily began weeping. She stated she couldn't believe I was so nasty after telling everyone how proud she was of me. At that time, our mother emerged from the hall bathroom. I hadn't even known she was present. She advised me to calm down and think about family. She mentioned that Emily and Luke needed us somewhere to stay, and I had room, so this was the apparent option. I got out my phone and dialed the non-emergency police number. Emily stopped weeping right away and asked what I was doing. I mentioned that I was reporting a break-in. Luke claimed I was overreacting. My father advised me to hang up before doing anything I would later regret. I did not hang up. I described the problem to the dispatcher and provided my address. They stated an officer will be within 25 minutes. Emily grabbed her pocketbook and said they should leave. Luke began gathering up crates. My father told me I was making a major mistake and would regret abandoning my family. My mother warned me that if I followed through with this, they would no longer want anything to do with me. I replied, "That sounded okay." They began taking items out to the vehicle. It took them around 20 minutes to load everything. They had already left by the time the cops came. The officer took my statement. I showed him my lease and ID with my current address. I showed him the old lock and emphasized that I had not given anyone permission to enter my flat or replace the locks. I provided him the names and addresses of my parents, as well as those of Emily and Luke. He stated he'd make a report and have someone from the department follow up. He advised me to replace the locks immediately because I had no way of knowing if they had made duplicates of the new keys. I phoned a locksmith that night and had new locks fitted the next morning before heading to work. That night, I received 17 texts from various family members. The majority were from folks I hardly knew. They warned me not to contact the police because it would shame the family. They said Emily and Luke merely wanted help. They called me selfish for not sharing when I had additional space. A few family, notably Aunt Grace, supported me, but the majority seemed to believe I had overreacted. Emily posted on Facebook that night. She stated that she attempted to reach out to her brother for assistance but was refused. She stated she thought I had changed, but it was evident that I was still the same selfish person I had always been. She said that she and Luke were struggling but doing their best. The message drew scores of supportive remarks. I did not answer publicly, but I did send a private message to 3 of my cousins with the complete story. They were startled when I informed them about the break-in and the new locks. Over the next several days, word traveled around the family about what had transpired. The story began to alter. My Aunt Grace commented on Emily's Facebook post, wondering whether it was true that they had broken into my flat without permission. Emily erased the entire post after that. My cousin Oliver, with whom I had always gotten along, called to tell me that numerous family members were now questioning Emily's account of events. I received a call from a detective the following Monday. He asked whether I wanted to file charges for breaking and entering. I said yes. He indicated he'd follow up with my parents on their engagement with the locksmith. I provided him the locksmith's contact information from the company sticker on the old lock mechanism that I had retained. That's how things stood until yesterday. Update 1. It had been 4 weeks since Emily and Luke attempted to move into my flat. I need to provide an update since the matter has progressed in ways I did not foresee. After I submitted the police complaint and met with a detective, everything was quiet for almost a week. I have not heard from my parents or Emily. A few relatives called to check on me, but the majority of the family appeared to be waiting to see what happened next. The detective phoned me back 9 days after our initial talk. He stated that he had interrogated my parents and the locksmith they had hired. The locksmith acknowledged that my father had contacted him and stated that it was an emergency since his son had been locked out of his apartment and needed to get in urgently. The locksmith stated that my father had provided him the address and that he had arrived with identification matching my last name. The locksmith thought that everything was authentic. The investigator said that the locksmith would not face any charges since he had been duped. However, my parents had purposefully planned for unlawful entrance into my flat, which was criminal trespass and perhaps breaking and entering. The investigator asked me again if I wanted to proceed with the allegations. I informed him that I needed some time to think about it. He said that was all right, but I should notify him within the next week or two. I debated what to do for several days. Part of me wanted to simply move on and remove my parents and Emily out of my life entirely. Another part of me was enraged at what they had done and wanted them to face the consequences. My cousin Sophia called when I was attempting to make a decision. She said there had been a major disagreement at my parents' residence a few days prior. Emily's husband Luke had allegedly discussed looking for a new apartment for him and Emily to rent, but Emily had declined. She stated that she did not want to pay rent when my parents already had a home. Luke had pointed out that they couldn't stay with her parents indefinitely, especially if they wanted to establish a family. Emily had explained that this was precisely why they needed to remain with her parents to save money. My mother had evidently agreed with Emily and said they may remain for as long as they needed. Luke became upset and left the house for many hours. Sophia stated that the family was conversing since Emily and Luke's marriage appeared to be under pressure. Some family felt awful for Luke since he worked full-time while Emily did not. Others felt horrible for Emily since they thought Luke was unfair and wanting her to leave a free living environment. I found the whole affair tiresome to hear about. I told Sophia I appreciated her keeping me updated, but I was trying to detach myself from everything. 3 days following that call, something else occurred. When I got home from work, I discovered Emily sitting on the steps outside my apartment building. She was alone. When she noticed me, she rose up and said she needed to speak. I inquired what she wanted. She stated she wanted to apologize and explain what had transpired. I told her I wasn't interested in hearing excuses. She began weeping, saying she had no idea how dangerous breaking into my flat was. She said that she was only yearning for extra room and felt I'd understand once I saw how much they needed it. She stated our parents had persuaded her that everything would be great and that I would come around once I saw they were serious. I asked her why she felt entitled to my flat just because I had an additional bedroom. She claimed she wasn't attempting to be entitled. She said that she had always felt second to me as we grew up, and she had now decided that there was something I could do to assist her. That sentence took me by surprise, and I chuckled. I inquired whether she was serious. She said yes. She said that I had always been the responsible one, the one who worked things out, and she had always felt like she was living in my shadow. I told her that was the most ludicrous thing I'd ever heard. I reminded her that growing up she had everything handed to her, but I had to fight for everything. I reminded her that our parents paid for her private school and university, but I attended community college and worked night shifts. I reminded her that she had been living rent-free with our parents for 5 years, but I had lived in a camper for nearly a year. She stated that such things were different. She stated that our parents assisted her since she needed it more. I asked her why she needed it more. She didn't have a response. I told her to go. She stated that she was sincerely trying to make things right and asked if there was anything she could do. I suggested she start by finding a job and moving out of our parents' house rather than expecting others to solve her issues. That made her upset. She said I had no right to evaluate her life choices. She explained that not everyone wants to work themselves to death as I did. I stated I worked hard since no one else was going to look after me. She said I was just resentful because I had a difficult time during the epidemic. I urged her to leave my property before I contacted the cops again. She departed that night. My mother sent me a series of furious text messages. She stated Emily had returned home unhappy after attempting to apologize to me. She said I had been harsh and disrespectful. She said Emily was struggling emotionally and that I had exacerbated the situation. She stated that a true brother would be supportive rather than bringing up prior issues with Emily. I didn't reply to any of the communications. The next morning, I phoned the investigator and informed him I wanted to proceed with filing charges. He stated he will forward the material to the prosecutor's office. He indicated it would probably be a few weeks before anything official happened, but he'd keep me updated. I felt relieved after making my selection. I'd spent too long allowing my family to treat me as if I were the problem. About a week and a half ago, my father contacted me. It was the first time I'd heard from him personally since the break-in. He asked if we could meet for coffee and speak. I told him that everything he needed to say could be said over the phone. He stated that he wanted to apologize in person. I informed him that I was not interested in an apology unless it came with true accountability. He inquired what I meant by it. I explained that Dad and my mother had spent my whole life choosing Emily above me, and instead of admitting it, they were now creating excuses for her. He was silent for a minute. Then he said I was exaggerating how horrible things had been. He said that they had always tried to be fair to both of us. I inquired whether he truly believed that. I provided concrete instances, private education, a vacation to Europe, funded university fees, and 5 years of free housing. He explained that those were only ways they had assisted Emily when she needed it. I questioned why I never received assistance when I needed it. He said that I had always been more autonomous, and they felt I was all right. I asked him if he ever thought to ask me whether I was okay instead of assuming. He did not respond. I informed him that I had already met with the detective and was pressing forward with charges. He warned me that I would come to regret this decision. I expressed my doubts. I hung up. Emily posted again on Facebook a few days ago. She made a lengthy piece about how toxic family members will attempt to drag you down when you are struggling. She stated that some individuals keep grudges forever and refuse to forgive. She stated that she was learning to create boundaries with those who did not promote her progress. People who were unaware of the real story sent several encouraging comments on the site. Several of my cousins replied, wondering what she was referring about. She did not reply to them. My Aunt Grace gave me a copy of the message saying Emily was definitely referring to me. I told her I knew but didn't care. I received a call yesterday from a number I did not recognize. I responded, and it was Luke. He claimed he needed to speak with me without Emily knowing. He asked if we could meet someplace. I was apprehensive, but I eventually agreed. We met at a coffee cafe near my workplace. Luke seemed weary. He stated that he had been thinking about all that had transpired and wished to apologize for his role in it. He said that he had agreed to Emily and my parents' plan because he was yearning to leave their place. He said he had not properly considered what they were doing until the cops arrived. He said that his relationship with Emily has deteriorated since then. She refused to talk about moving out or obtaining a job. She spent the most of her time on her phone or watching television. She began scolding him for working too much and not spending enough time with her. He claimed he felt confined. I questioned why he didn't just leave. He replied he had considered it, but he still loved Emily and hoped she would change. I informed him that in my experience, individuals only change when necessary. She saw no need to change as long as our parents continued to enable her. He stated that he was beginning to grasp this. He thanked me for meeting with him and then departed. I'm not sure what to make of that talk. Part of me felt sorry for Luke because he appeared really overwhelmed. Another part of me believed he had made his own decisions and now had to deal with the consequences. In any case, I had no responsibility to resolve the situation. The prosecutor's office phoned me yesterday afternoon. They stated that they were filing charges against my parents for criminal trespass and conspiracy to commit burglary. The charges against Emily were still being evaluated. They suggested I could have to testify if the matter went to trial, but my parents were more likely to accept a plea agreement. I replied that I understood and will help them with whatever they needed. I haven't notified most of my relatives about the accusations yet. I presume my parents will inform people after they have been legally charged. I'm sure there will be criticism, and some will think I went too far, but I've spent my entire life being instructed to accept how others treated me. I'm done with that. They broke into my residence and attempted to transfer someone in without my consent. This is not a family quarrel. That is a crime, and they must face the penalties. Update 2. The consequences of bringing charges have been harsher than I imagined. 4 weeks ago, my parents were legally charged with criminal trespass and conspiracy. The prosecution proposed a plea agreement that included probation, community service, and compensation for the locksmith expenses and the cost of changing the locks again. They declined the deal. According to my Aunt Grace, my mother believes that if they go to trial, the jury will realize that they were only trying to assist their daughter and will side with them. My father evidently believes the charges will be dropped. Their lawyer must not be offering them sound advice. Emily was also prosecuted, but for a lesser violation because she had no direct involvement in organizing the locksmith. She was given a plea agreement that included a fine, and probation she declined it as well. Luke was not prosecuted because the prosecution found that he was coerced into cooperating and shown genuine regret. The family parted when the allegations were made public. Approximately half of my relatives believe I went too far in bringing accusations. They have stated that family matters should be handled privately and that I am ripping the family apart over something that might have been settled by a chat. The other half believe my parents and Emily caused the issue and must bear the consequences. Thanksgiving was last week. I did not attend any family gatherings. My Aunt Grace threw a dinner and invited me, but I declined since numerous of my family who believe I am in the wrong were also present. I spent Thanksgiving alone in my apartment eating takeaway from a Chinese restaurant. Luke phoned me again 3 weeks ago. He told me he had moved out of my parents' house and was temporarily residing with a friend. He stated that he had asked Emily to join him in looking for a place, but she had declined. She warned him that if he went, he would be abandoning her when she needed him the most. He departed anyhow. He stated that they were not yet legally split but were spending time apart. He seemed pleased to be out of that place but yet sad that his marriage was going apart. Emily contacted me a few days after Luke had moved out. I did not respond. She left a voicemail. In the recording, her voice was raw and angry. She claimed that I had always been jealous of her relationship and was attempting to ruin her life, and that Luke's departure was my fault because I had planted ideas in his mind when we met at the coffee shop. I erased it and banned her number. My mother started contacting me from several numbers. She would call from relatives' phones or strange numbers that I didn't recognize. When I responded, she began chatting before I could hang up. She said I was wrecking their lives. She warned that if the allegations were made public, my father's business would suffer. She claimed Emily was depressed and seldom left her room. She said I had no clue what I'd done to the family. I assured her I knew precisely what I'd done. I had established a barrier and enforced it. I said that they could have avoided all of this if they had just respected my request not to enter my flat. She said I was being vengeful. I hung up and blocked their numbers too. My cousin Oliver called me around 4 weeks ago. He mentioned that he had some facts I should know about. He claimed he was chatting to our Aunt Claire, my mother's eldest sister, and she told him about something that happened years ago when I was still in high school. Apparently, the bias toward Emily had sparked a heated family debate. Several relatives questioned my parents about it at a holiday event. They had pointed out that I was being treated unjustly, which was likely to have long-term consequences. My parents had become defensive. Following that meeting, my parents had little communication with the majority of their extended relatives. That explains why we only met family during major holidays when I was a teenager. Oliver said Aunt Claire had felt bad for years for not doing more to assist me. She stated that she had contemplated contacting Child Protective Services but was frightened of causing a schism in the family. I didn't know what to say when Oliver told me this. Part of me hoped that someone had interfered. Another part of me realized why they hadn't. It is difficult to become interested in other people's family troubles. Last week, the prosecutor contacted me with an update. My parents' trial date had been scheduled in February. Emily's case was still ongoing. The prosecution stated that they were confident in obtaining a conviction based on the evidence, which included the locksmith's testimony, the antiquated lock mechanism, and testimonies from all those involved. She inquired whether I was still willing to testify. I said yes. That same day, I received a letter from my mother. It was written on flowered stationery. She stated that she had been thinking a lot and recognized she had made mistakes as a parent. She claimed she didn't want to favor Emily and was only trying to help her because Emily had always been more sensitive and required more support. She said that she had believed I would be all right because I had always been capable and independent. She apologized for not showing up to my high school graduation and for not assisting me when I needed a place to stay during the epidemic. She expressed optimism that I would forgive her and that we could go on as a family. At the end of the letter, she begged that I dismiss the accusations. She said they couldn't afford a trial and the stress was harming my father's health. She stated that Emily was hurting since Luke had gone and she was now alone at their home without him as a buffer. She stated that if I dropped the accusations, they would all seek family counseling and strive to restore our connections. She signed the letter with Love, Mother. I reread the letter 3 times, then I tossed it aside. It wasn't a true apology. It was a final attempt to persuade me to back down. She hadn't accepted any real responsibility. She had only offered additional excuses, and her desire to withdraw the charges in the end demonstrated that she was not truly remorseful. She only wanted to escape penalties. I phoned the prosecutor the next day and informed her that I had received the letter. I inquired whether my mother's communication with me was okay. She replied, "Technically yes, because there was no restraining order in effect, but if I felt harassed, I could file one." I said I'd think about it. She stated that trial preparation would begin in January and that she would contact them after the holidays. Luke texted me a few days ago. He indicated he'd filed for divorce. He said Emily did not take it well and blamed me in a series of furious letters to him. He stated he wanted to thank me for being open with him about how enabling works. He stated our chat made him realize he couldn't keep waiting for Emily to change. I told him I was happy he was doing what was best for himself. He stated that he would most likely have to testify at the trial because he witnessed the break-in. I stated that it was between him and the prosecution. Yesterday, I received a message from a relative I hadn't heard from in years. She stated that Emily had set up a GoFundMe site to raise money for legal bills. The page said she was being unfairly punished by an aggressive prosecutor who did not understand family dynamics. It said she and her parents were victims of a misunderstanding that had been exaggerated. It requested $15,000. So far, it has raised $300, the majority of which came from those who were unaware of the complete tale. My cousin inquired whether I was aware of the page. I said I didn't, but I wasn't shocked. I reported the GoFundMe site as presenting incorrect information. I'm not sure whether they'll take it down, but I linked to news stories on the charges that provided correct information about what happened. I also forwarded the link to my Aunt Grace, asking her to share the truth with anybody who would be interested in donating. She said she would. I've been thinking a lot about whether I made the correct decision in bringing charges. Some days, I am convinced that I did the right thing. Other days, I wonder whether I should have just moved on and stopped communicating without using the judicial system. But then I remembered coming into my flat and seeing them there. I recall my father arranging for someone to break in. Emily was seated on my bed shooting photographs as if she had already decided my place belonged to her and I knew I had made the correct decision. They needed to understand that actions had repercussions. Perhaps they will learn from this process, or they will continue to make excuses and play the victim. Either way, it is no longer my duty. Update 3. The trial occurred 3 weeks ago. I'm writing this final update because numerous family have inquired what occurred, and I'm weary of telling it over and over. This will be the last time I explain the topic in public. The trial lasted 3 days. I testified on the first day. The prosecution requested me to explain what happened when I returned home and saw my family in my flat. I recounted the time frame and displayed images I had taken of the old lock mechanism and the evidence they had left behind. I was on the stand for almost 90 minutes. The defense counsel attempted to make it appear as if I had overreacted to a family disagreement. She questioned why I had phoned the police rather than just asking them to leave. I claimed I requested them to leave, but they refused. She inquired whether I had thought that my sister was in severe need of assistance. I explained that desperation did not excuse breaking into someone's home. My mother sobbed throughout my testimony. My father sat stone-faced. Emily was not in court since her case was distinct. The defense also attempted to claim that my father truly felt he was assisting me by arranging for a locksmith because he suspected I had locked myself out. The locksmith testified that my father never stated that I was inside the apartment or that an emergency required rapid admission. This weakened their story. Luke testified on the second day. He admitted that he and Emily had planned to move into my flat without my consent. He stated that my parents had told them that once I realized they were serious, I would be all right with it. He said that he was uneasy with the arrangement, but agreed to it since he wanted to leave my parents' place. The defense attempted to characterize him as an untrustworthy witness since he was going through a divorce with Emily, but his evidence corroborated everything else on the record. The jury deliberated for around 5 hours. They judged my parents guilty on both counts. Sentencing was planned for 3 weeks later. My mother burst into tears as the decision was read. My father rested his head on his hands. Several relatives who had attended the trial exited the courtroom immediately. I remained to the finish. Emily's case was concluded independently with a plea agreement the week following my parents' trial. She agreed to a bargain that included a fine, 1 year of probation, and 50 hours of community service. She didn't have to serve any jail time. According to Luke, she accepted the bargain because her counsel warned her she would lose if she went to trial, especially because my parents had been convicted. My parents were sentenced last week. They each received 2 years of probation, 200 hours of community service, and a $3,000 restitution order to reimburse the locksmith bills, lock replacement, and legal costs. They were also instructed to make no contact with me until I started it. The judge stated in her remarks that parents who exploit their relationship with their children to cross boundaries and commit crimes establish a dangerous precedent. My mother sobbed during the punishment, saying, "My parents had shown poor judgment and a lack of respect for the law." My father didn't glance at me once. The family has seen considerable consequences. About 1/3 of my relatives have stopped speaking to me completely. They believe I ruined my parents' reputation over something petty. Another third has been supportive, saying my parents should face the consequences of their conduct. The remaining third appears to be attempting to remain neutral and avoid taking sides. I've accepted that certain relationships have ended. I am fine with that. Luke's divorce from Emily was finalized 3 weeks ago. They had no assets to share because they had been living with my parents and hadn't saved anything. Luke relocated to another city for a new career. Before he departed, he texted me, "Thank you for being honest with him about everything. I wished him well. Emily still lives with my parents. According to my Aunt Grace, she has not found work and spends much of her time in her room. My parents appear to be straining to pay restitution on top of their legal bills. My father lost 2 business clients because they did not want to be affiliated with someone who had been convicted of a crime. My mother has stopped visiting church because she does not want to confront others who know what occurred. I haven't spoken to any of them since their punishment. I do not intend to. The no-contact order makes this easy because they can't reach me even if they wanted to. I banned their phone numbers and social media profiles. I've urged family not to pass on texts from them. Most people have honored the request. Last weekend, I arranged a little dinner at my place for the family who have supported me during this process. My Aunt Grace cousins Oliver and Sophia and a few more joined us. It was good to spend time with people that treated me like family. We did not discuss the trial or my parents. We just had supper, played cards, and behaved normally. Someone asked if I regretted filing charges. I said no. I expressed sadness that it had to happen at all, but I didn't regret holding them accountable. They chose to break into my flat. They decided to try to move Emily in without asking me. They chose to lie to the locksmith and refused to leave when I instructed them to. These were their options. The repercussions were the effect of their decisions. I'm not sure what the future holds for my parents and Emily. I don't think about it much anymore. I have a job, an apartment, and friends and relatives that genuinely care about me. That's enough. I am not interested in reconciling or mending relationships with folks who have consistently demonstrated that they do not respect me. Some would argue it is harsh or cruel. I believe it is simply being realistic. This will be my final report on the matter. I'm closing this chapter and moving on. Thank you to everyone who has provided help and guidance. It helped more than you realize.